Lake Okeechobee means big water in the Seminole Native American language. It's been called a toxic, dangerous, destructive body of water, and also one of Florida's greatest ecological treasures.
Florida officials started draining Lake Okeechobee to keep the state safe from floods, but they didn't expect the lakebed to start moving back at them. Strange footage shows massive, dark shapes rising and shifting through the slime, and it isn't just mud. People are talking about ancient creatures and lost cities coming back to life as the water disappears. You won't believe what's hiding under 9 feet of water, and some say it should have stayed buried. This is a key detail that most people are totally missing right now. Ancient shifting under shallow waters. Lake Okeechobee is the largest freshwater lake in Florida, covering about 730 square miles. It is often called the heart of the Everglades because it supplies water to the entire southern part of the state. For many years, the water has been kept at a steady level by the United States Army Corps of Engineers. They use a system of dikes, canals, and levees to stop the water from flooding nearby farms and towns. This system was built a long time ago, mostly after the big hurricane in 1928 that caused a lot of trouble. Basically, the lake is shaped like a giant shallow saucer. On average, it is only about 9 feet deep, which is not very much for a lake that big. In late 2024,
hard to believe it's been 15 years since Central Florida's nightmare hurricane season of 2004. 3 devastating storms, back to back to back.
The officials decided to lower the water level by several feet. They needed to do this for maintenance and to prevent flooding during the upcoming stormy season. As the water began to recede, thousands of acres of mudflats started to appear. This was expected, but what happened next was not. Drone footage and satellite images started showing huge, dark masses moving across the lakebed. These were not small patches of dirt. They were acre-sized masses that seemed to be crawling toward the remaining water. People watching the footage from their homes in Florida were shocked. It looked like the ground was alive. The real kicker is that these masses were moving 15 to 20 feet every single day. You could see the drag marks left behind in the soft muck. For starters, many people thought it was just a trick of the light or some weird shadows from the clouds. But then, more footage came out showing the same thing happening in different parts of the lake. Locals who have lived near the lake for 70 years said they had never seen anything like it. It was as if the draining of the lake had disturbed something that had been resting for a very long time. Against all logic, these moving masses were even showing up on thermal cameras used by researchers. This meant they had a different temperature than the surrounding mud. Everyone's obsessed with finding out what is really going on down there. Is it just the mud shifting, or is something hiding inside it? The local news stations started getting hundreds of calls from worried residents. Some were even afraid to go near the shoreline. The lake is so big that you can't see across it, which makes the mystery feel even more intense. So, here's the deal with how the lake was changed by humans. Before the dikes were built, the lake would naturally overflow its southern rim during the rainy season. This water would flow slowly through the sawgrass marshes and into the Everglades. When the engineers built the Herbert Hoover Dike, they cut off that natural flow. This turned the lake into a giant reservoir. Because the water was stuck there, a lot of sediment started to build up on the bottom. This sediment is a mix of organic matter, sand, and clay. But there was a catch they didn't see coming. Over many decades, runoff from sugarcane and citrus farms around the lake brought in huge amounts of chemicals. Things like phosphorus and nitrogen ended up settling in the mud. Scientists call this legacy sediment. There are millions of kilograms of this stuff sitting at the bottom. When the water gets low, this legacy mud becomes very unstable. It's not just a regular solid. It behaves in a very strange way when it gets moved around. But the real shocker was that the mud wasn't the only thing moving down there. Lurking chemical disaster below the surface. One of the most overlooked aspects of this whole situation is the science of the mud itself. Scientists use a fancy word for it, thixotropic. Basically, that means the mud acts like a solid when it is still, but it turns into a liquid when it is shaken or moved. It's a lot like jello or quicksand. When the water level drops, the weight of the water above the mud is gone. This allows the mud to expand and start flowing. It is a non-Newtonian fluid, which is a key detail scientists are studying right now. But here's the catch. The mud isn't just moving on its own. It is full of gas. As the organic matter at the bottom of the lake rots, it releases gases like methane. These gases get trapped inside the thick black mud. This creates big bubbles that can lift the mud up or make it move in weird directions. To a person watching from a drone, it looks like a giant creature is crawling under a blanket. The mud is a dark, gelatinous mixture that many locals call legacy muck. It's very sticky and smells like rotten eggs because of all the sulfur and decay. And get this. When this mud moves, it releases all those old chemicals back into the water. This is a massive problem for the environment. The phosphorus and nitrogen act like food for algae. As the mud shifts, it triggers huge toxic algal blooms. These blooms turn the water a bright neon green color. It looks like someone dumped a giant bucket of paint into the lake. These blooms are not just ugly, they are very dangerous. They can take all the oxygen out of the water, which leads to a massive loss of life for the fish. In some parts of the lake, scientists found that 60% of the fish had passed away because of these blooms. The toxins can also spread into the canals and out to the ocean. This hurts the tourism and fishing industries in Florida. A lot of people are confused about why this is happening now. It turns out that the lower water levels are making the mud release 50% more phosphorus than it usually does. It's like a ticking time bomb that finally went off because the engineers decided to drain the lake. The crazy part is that these plumes of mud are so thick they can be seen from space. NOAA and NASA have captured images of these black plumes turning the water dark and lifeless. It looks like a giant ink blot spreading through the lake. Many are not seeing the truth here, which is that the lake is struggling to handle all the pollution we have put into it over the last 100 years. The mud is just a symptom of a much bigger issue. It's a physical reminder of how much we have changed the natural world. See, the mud isn't just sitting there. It reacts to the wind and the currents too. Even a small storm can stir up thousands of tons of this toxic sludge.
Toxic sludge making its way into Tennessee waterways. That's what one Sierra Club study just found. And the bigger concern is the harmful chemicals that sludge can contain, known as PFAS.
Because it is so mobile, it can migrate from one side of the lake to the other in just a few days. This makes it very hard for the officials to manage. They try to keep the mud in certain areas, but it just keeps sliding toward the deeper water. It's like trying to hold a handful of wet soap. It just wants to slip away. Little did they know, the shifting mud was about to reveal something even more shocking than just pollution. Mysterious entities waking from the deep. As if things couldn't get any weirder, people started finding things in the mud that weren't supposed to be there. For centuries, the area around Lake Okeechobee was home to the Calusa people. They were a powerful tribe known as the Shell People. They built amazing canals and mounds out of seashells. When the lake was smaller and the dikes weren't there, they lived all around the edges. But as the lake was expanded and the water levels were managed, many of their old villages were swallowed up by the water. Now that the lake is being drained, these ancient sites are coming back to the surface. Archaeologists have found pottery, tools, and even human remains from the Calusa and other even older tribes. It is a massive treasure chest of history. But it also adds to the mystery of the moving mud. Some people think that the dark masses moving in the water are actually ancient burial mounds or structures that are being uncovered and shifted by the currents. There are rumors that whole underwater cities are being revealed for the first time in thousands of years. Wait, it gets better. Some of the locals believe the moving mud is a cover for something much more alive. There have been sightings of giant snake-like creatures in Lake Okeechobee for a long time. People describe them as being 20 to 30 feet long and as thick as a tree trunk. They call them the Okeechobee serpents. When the water gets low, these creatures might be forced to move into the remaining deep pools. This would explain the huge drag marks and the coordinated movement of the mud. One of the most famous stories is about massive eels that live in the deep, dark tunnels at the bottom of the lake. These eels are said to be much larger than any normal eel found in Florida. Some believe they are prehistoric holdovers that have survived in the anoxic, or oxygen-poor, depths of the lake. The moving patches of mud could be these giant creatures stirring from their sleep. They might be responding to the change in water pressure and the loss of their habitat. Hands down, the most terrifying idea is that the mud itself is being animated by some kind of unknown biological organism. Some researchers have suggested that colonies of bacteria or algae could be creating a thick skin on top of the mud. This skin would trap gases and create a moving, breathing mass. While this sounds like science fiction, it would explain why the shapes seem to move in such a coordinated way. It's like a giant living carpet sliding across the bottom of the lake. But there is a massive caveat. Not everyone believes in monsters or ancient spirits. Skeptics say that it's all just physics and chemistry. They argue that the methane gas and the thixotropic nature of the mud are enough to explain everything. But then, the unthinkable happened. A group of fishermen reported seeing a massive, dark shape rise several feet out of the water before sinking back into the muck. They said it didn't look like any alligator or manatee they had ever seen. It was something else entirely. Then things really started to spiral when people looked closer at the mud tracks. Shadowy truths behind the draining project. There are still many rumors in the air about what the government is actually doing at Lake Okeechobee. Some people believe that the draining isn't just for flood control. They think it's a cover to hide something that happened decades ago. Because the lake is so remote and large, it would be the perfect place for secret experiments. Over the years, people have reported seeing strange lights over the water at night. Others say they have seen military helicopters flying low over the lake when the water levels are at their lowest. One theory is that the lakebed hides classified testing sites for biological agents or weather modification technology. If something went wrong, the easiest way to hide the evidence would be to let it sink into the thick black mud at the bottom. The moving masses could be the result of these old experiments reacting to the environment. Maybe a chemical or biological anomaly was preserved in the deep mud and is now being exposed to the sun and the air. This would be a major turn in the story that nobody saw coming. It is not that simple, though, because the sugarcane industry has a huge influence on how the lake is managed. For years, environmentalists have complained that the government prioritizes the big farms over the health of the lake. Some suggest that the moving mud is actually a distraction to keep people from looking too closely at the illegal dumping of waste. The real kicker is that the cleanup of the lake has been delayed for decades, allowing the toxic pile to grow larger and larger every year. What do you think is really moving under the mud of Lake Okeechobee? Could it be ancient creatures or a secret government cover-up? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this mystery, make sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the unknown. See you in the next one.